I'm Vinnie Bagwell. Welcome to my studio. I'm a sculptor. I am one of those born artists. I could draw very well as a child, discovered painting in high school. I actually went to college for psychology, but got tired of it in senior year and decided to mix art with psychology and became a graphic designer. And then of course discovered that people don't write very much, so there was a need for writing, so I got into writing. And then ultimately, at 36, I discovered I had a painting block. I hadn't painted for many years, and decided that I wanted to get back into it, and nothing happened, which was scary. So I decided to try sculpting as a primer for the well. And needless to say, I was quite surprised. Sculpting came as a real surprise, and immediately I knew that God had other ideas. In my first year of sculpting, I really didn't know what I was doing, and so I did quite a bit of research, discovered the concept of grant writing and public art and things like that. So my first public artwork was Ella Fitzgerald. I wrote a proposal to the city of Yonkers and asked them to do her because she was still alive. They said yes. I am working on a African burial ground for Montgomery, New York. 86 children buried in the woods on a rural road. That's very exciting. It goes back to the mid-1700s, which is a big deal for historic preservation. So we're all very excited about that. The Enslaved Africans Rain Garden is a project that I've been developing for the last 11 going on 12 years. We discovered that the Phillips family was one of the first major slave traders in the country, as large as the folks in South Carolina. People think New York was where you came to escape slavery, and New York was financing slavery. So, that's a very interesting story. People from all over the world have watched that project from the beginning on social media, so we're all anticipating it. So very excited about that. Boise, Idaho. I'm doing a public artwork about Irma Heyman, who is a local woman that made a tremendous impact in her community. I'm also finishing up Welford Sanders for Milwaukee. We're trying to get him installed. Welford Sanders was a remarkable developer, developing a whole neighborhood, transforming and revitalizing buildings and creating affordable housing and things like that. As for the future, there's a bunch of things coming down the road. Of course, can't really talk about them until I actually go to contract, but it's interesting how things have evolved in 2020. It began, of course, with pandemic. Pandemic has been quite remarkable in that on the second day of self-quarantine, my governor, Andrew Cuomo, declared me an essential business, which enabled me and all of my vendors to continue to work, so we were uninterrupted. This enabled us to complete Sojourner Truth in time for the 19th Amendment's 100th anniversary, which was a big deal for the state of New York. As well as several of my other projects that I was working on at the time. So 2020 has been seamless for me. I think one of the most remarkable things that I witnessed was how the whole world woke up all at once. Like all of a sudden, everybody realized we're tired of being oppressed. Black people, people all over the world have just decided that this is the time to have a temper tantrum and to try to right wrongs. One of the outcomes of that is that public art has been eyeballed as a major vehicle that can be used for education and informing people about, real life, real stories, real people. And so there's now this tremendous movement towards creating public art grants, commissions, public art commissions, whatever the case may be, to represent people of color. And so the joy is that I've been doing it for a while, so I'm now considered one of the premier people in the industry because there aren't many black people in the public art arena. In 2008, I moved back to Yonkers. I had lived in Maryland for 10 years. And, I spent the first year, I was doing Frederick Douglass at the time, and I spent the first year just assessing Yonkers to see who was still here. And one of the nice things about Yonkers is some things change and some things don't. And the city council majority leader at that time was Patricia McDowell. We got into a conversation about slavery. And like a lot of people, I didn't realize that there was a history here of slavery because I just didn't. So we decided that we wanted to try to create some sort of memorial to them because we don't know exactly where they're buried. And I started doing research, and I discovered that the Phillips family, and mind you, the house is a block away from where I live. The house is almost 400 years old, and in the late 1600s, 1685 to 1695, in my research that the Phillips family, talking about the original Frederick Phillips and his wife Margaret Hardenbrock, they decided to get into the slave trade. He was a boat builder for the West India Company, and most people who know anything about slavery know that this is the company that was mostly importing enslaved Africans. That was the second thing I discovered, that they're not slaves, they're called enslaved Africans. And so it was really, really remarkable to, learn this information about slavery. And so long and short, what really tripped me out, because the big question is, why does this matter, was when I discovered that John Jay, and everybody kind of knows John Jay in New York because there's a John Jay College. John Jay was a founding father of the United States of America. He was a statesman and a legislator and a variety of political positions. And he kept writing these bills and laws trying to get slavery abolished. And it wasn't working. And then finally, after a number of tries, he created the first law to abolish slavery. Well, it was manumission. And manumission is something else, not like you're free. Manumission is kind of like servitude for 7 years, and then we're going to give you your 40 acres and a mule. Ironically, a number of years later, two professors came from John Jay to tell me that he was not as benevolent as we thought he was. There was a lot that went on in terms of manumitting children and just all kinds of disheartening things. But in the final analysis, there's a tremendous history here in Yonkers about slavery. And so, this was the impetus for creating the Enslaved Africans Rain Garden. With all of the revitalization and gentrification that's going on here, we want the new people who are not from Yonkers, that are not from Westchester County, to know that there is a tremendous history here, that it isn't just kind of like we woke up like this. That at once upon a time, the Phillips family owned the better part of Westchester, from the Bronx to Croton, which is 54,000 acres of land, which is tremendous. And so it's just been fascinating learning the ins and outs about history here in Yonkers. It's just quite remarkable. It's interesting, as a artist who creates art for public places, it's a little different than curatorial artists, and here it is. Usually people think of artists as people who make artwork, sell it, show it in exhibitions, show it in museums, things like that. A public artist is a little different. We create art for public places, which means we have a tremendously diverse viewership. And ideally, you want to create art that anybody can understand. And so in the beginning, from the very beginning, one of the things that I thought made sense was to bring everyday people into my process. So for instance, with Ella, I had 5 apprentices from the high school. In 2010, when I first began the Enslaved Africans Rain Garden project, And so with that, I decided to focus on bringing people into my process. So for instance, with Ella Fitzgerald, I had 5 apprentices from the local high school. At that time, Roosevelt High School was the arts magnet. Fast forward, during the course of the Enslaved Africans Rain Garden Project, there was a whole big civic engagement section to that. So for instance, I had in-studio workshops. I did 5th graders for the Pearl School, high school students, college students, and again, an opportunity for not just creative students, but just students in general to be able to come into an artist space, see public art in progress and be able to talk about progress as well as talk about the story that the art represented. Second part of that was preview, and preview basically is a big party. Luckily this building has a tremendous vestibule, so food in the hallway, and people just milling around and talking to each other about art. And so point of it is that I won a prize this year from Americans for the Arts for civic engagement. Again, because at every turn, I've tried to bring the local community as well as the world into my space through civic engagements events, as well as social media. I don't know that there is a how to do this sort of thing. I mean, I was very lucky in that I was invited into this arena at the very beginning. The fact that Sculpture House Casting gave me a hand at the very beginning enabled me to get my first one. The challenge with public art commissions is that it's big money, and commissioners usually aren't used to having commissions. This is not what they normally do. So normally they don't have experience themselves, and if they do, again, they prefer to have artists that already know what they're doing. Nevertheless, new people do appear in the arena, and so I'm going to say that if I were going to give a how-to begins with making your best work, paying attention to details, bringing your A game, as they say. You need a damn good photographer, someone who knows how to capture your art as well as it can be captured. We all have iPhones and Samsungs and whatever the case may be now, but really get yourself a professional photographer, have your work lit properly. You have to have a decent resume, so you have to try to do things, exhibit, see if you can get small commissions to start, or try a big one. You never know, you can win based on the merit of your work. But it requires a tremendous focus and diligence. Like anything else, you've got to try hard a lot, and you have to be consistent. In 2019, the city of New York removed a sculpture from Fifth Avenue of J. Marion Sims. J. Marion Sims is the father of gynecology. They removed it because the community, that would be East Harlem and Harlem, had been demanding it for 10 years. This is a man who became renowned because he experimented on enslaved African women without anesthesia or painkillers. Then turned around and went to Europe, same process with painkillers and anesthesia. So there was a competition in 2019. At finals, I was the only person who showed up. The other 3 artists did not. And the selection committee picked a different artist, and the community rioted. I mean, absolutely went bonkers for more than an hour. Screaming, crying, hysterics, cursing, just having an absolute temper tantrum because we had been held hostage for 7 hours. The community had been very adamant about what they did and did not want, and they felt that the city of New York had ignored them. It was such a tremendous reaction that the city council stood on the steps of City Hall 4 days later and called out the City of New York Cultural Affairs for abuse of power. And the Oversight Committee was called in to review whether or not this was so. It is now a year later. The commission, by the way, was the person who won, Simone Lee, stepped down. The commission was given to me, but it's a year later. And we're still waiting. Presently, most recently actually, New York City Oversight Committee Chairman Jimmy Van Bramer has asked the Cultural Affairs Commissioner, Gonzalo Consas, to ask the mayor, de Blasio, to release the funds to create the artwork in 2021. We are still waiting on that. There has been tremendous support of me, which is quite phenomenal. The community is adamant. They want Victory to be created. The media got on the bandwagon. I mean, from Art News, Art Forum, Time Magazine, New York, I mean, everybody just kind of got onto this story, and just, it's phenomenal because the community was just so verbal, so verbose about wanting this public artwork. So I'm looking forward to it. You know, I anticipate getting started sometime between now and next year this time. This artwork is to honor the women that made present gynecology breakthroughs possible. You know, rather than celebrate the man, they've resolved they want to celebrate the women. J. Marion Sims' sculpture has been reinstalled in Woodlawn Cemetery where he's interred, which we feel is appropriate, it's fair. And so it's just so important now, you know, particularly this year, 2020 is the year of the woman. Last year was the 400th anniversary of slavery. You know, we now have Black Lives Matter. And so this is all just very, very timely. We're looking to see leveling of the playing field in the public art arena, you know, where more stories are being told about everyone.